Hello friends, today we are talking about color grading, and I'm going to take you through my process and how I approach color grading all of my projects. I remember when I first started out, color grading felt very frustrating and confusing. I didn't really know where to start, and so over the years I've definitely developed my own style and process and how I like to go about creating the images that I get. And so I would hope this video would be helpful to you if you are somewhere along your journey of just trying to learn how to get images that you're really happy with. I hope that this video would help you. The foundation for all the color grading that we're going to be doing today is my LUTs and film effects. You guys can check these out in my shop if you have not seen them, but they are going to sort of serve as the building blocks for where we're starting today. The other main point in making this video is just to be a resource to anyone who has purchased any of my products. I really want to show people how I actually use them. Sometimes color grading is a 1 or 2 click process, and other times it is much more in depth of how we solve problems and get to a final image that we're really happy with. So if you have purchased my Meadow LUTs and Film Effects, I hope this video would really show you how to get the most out of them and to take you behind the scenes of what I do to use these effectively. Okay, so now that we are in DaVinci Resolve, I did want to start off by just giving you guys a little bit of context for the machine that I'm working on and the settings that I'm using. And so to start, I am using a MacBook M1 Pro, 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's not the newest one, but it has definitely served me well. And I'm just using the built-in Liquid Retina XDR display. When it comes to setting up DaVinci Resolve, if you are on a Mac, I would recommend just double checking that your settings are similar. So under general, I do have a few of these things checked. I can't remember what's default, but just wanted to show you guys in case I get asked. And then if we come down here to project settings, we come to color management. I do have mine set to DaVinci YRGB. I'm not using a color managed workflow or an ACES workflow. And this is set to Rec. 709A. I believe it is not originally set to Rec. 709A, and this has helped me retain consistency when using Apple computers, just to make my footage look consistent on Vimeo, YouTube, DaVinci Resolve, QuickTime Player Preview. It all is consistent when I set this to Rec. 709A. So just wanted to share that from the get-go. Getting started with color grading, we are going to move to the color tab, and you guys will see this first clip I have here. Node tree over here, and we're going to go ahead and open up our gallery. Let's make this a little bit bigger. And so for starting off, I'm just going to kind of show you guys how I build my node tree and keep things pretty simple. So to start, we are going to load one of my LUTs. So we're going to go to Meadow Standard LUT A. This is just my standard LUT for Rec. 709 footage. I think it usually looks great right off the bat. And we're going to name this LUT. And right away, guys, I mean, you could just be done there and move on. I will show you guys what I typically do, and I will add 2 nodes before. Call this one correct for correction, and this one highlight for any highlight corrections we're making. And I'm not needing to make either of these corrections on this clip. I think it looks great. We will go ahead and apply my Meadow Film Effects. So my favorite effect that I use on all my footage is my subtle. So I will append it, and it adds it to our node tree here. And you guys will see right away, just giving us a little bit of softness and a little bit of change to the contrast in the highlights. And for this particular clip, I think it looks great. I will probably turn the vignette off just because the lighting is already quite contrasty on the edges with the way this lighting rig was set up. And I think this clip looks great right off the bat. So we're gonna go ahead and copy this node tree here and go on to our next clip. So here's an interview scenario. Also shot this in Rec. 709 Classic Chrome with the Fujifilm X-H2S. We have 2 different angles here. We'll just start with this second angle and we'll paste what we had before. And guys, as you can see right away, we're looking really good. I would maybe turn the vignette on, come over here and just adjust it so she's in the center. And guys, the only thing that I'm seeing here is really just our skin tones. They maybe look a little warm to me, And I will say that is a common correction that I am making with my LUTs, depending on, being indoors or outdoors. This is just something, skin will always fluctuate. So to make this correction, we're just going to come over to our gamma and ever so slightly pull this towards blue. You guys will see it's super subtle, but that was before and then after. It's just taking out a little bit of the red tinge, and I think this clip looks great. If I were to do anything else, these windows, I might go to my adjustment node and just push up our gain just to brighten up the image slightly. I think these windows, I want to be pretty close to 100, but still give us some breathing room. So again, we're going to copy this node tree here and hit paste. And the only thing that I see here, because we're shooting on a different lens, this looks a little bit more green to my eye. So we're actually going to come back to our correction and we're going to undo this gamma correction. So it was pushed more towards blue. I'm just going to leave it with no correction, and you guys will see, I think that looks really, really nice. It looks pretty consistent, and we can move on to our next one. So here is a wedding example in the woods, and we're going to go ahead and paste this first node tree where we had no corrections. And guys, right away, these are like the examples where I love my LUTs. This is kind of the perfect scenario that I designed them for. I wouldn't really make any other tweaks here besides turning the vignette on and making sure that they are in the center. And this looks really good. If I were to make a little bit more of a technical correction, I would say the whites look a little bright. So I would come to our highlight node and come down here to highlight. And I would bring this down to say -50. You guys will see it does make our image darker. And I just want to show you guys, so before, if I save that, we make it darker. I'm then going to come to my adjustment node after the LUT, and I'm going to bring our gain back up. And so we'll show you guys this. So this was before tweaking the highlights, and this is after. So it brings down our overall level and how bright the highlights are, retains a lot of the detail, but if you guys look at the skin, it does just like make the skin feel a little less pale, a little bit more saturated without getting too red. And so that's a really common technique where I, in my first node, will retain highlight information, and then if it does feel too dark like this did, I will, keep an eye on my level up here and just bump my gain to where this is sitting a lot closer to 90. And I really love how it looks. Moving on to this one, I would say we have the same thing going on when we do our original node tree copy paste. Our whites are a little bit bright, so if we actually just go back to this one and paste, I think this looks really great. It brought back the highlights just a little bit in the dress and makes our skin look quite good. And yeah, I really love how this clip looks. Here's one where we are going to do a little bit of a white balance correction. So if we paste, I would say right away, this looks great. If we see down here, we are getting quite close to 0. And I would say the image, the whites to me look a little blue. So let's first go to our correction node and let's push this a little towards red and orange. And then let's bring our lift up slightly, not too much. But guys, right there, that shows you before and then after that correction. So it looks great with just the LUT and my film effects, but I would say if I were color grading this, this would be a lot closer to where I would end up. And it's a really simple tweak. So we're really just looking at the gamma, and then our lift affects our shadows. Moving on to this clip, this is a common scenario. We've got mixed lighting, daylight bulbs, tungsten bulbs. If we go ahead and paste, you guys are going to see right away, this is super common with LUTs like this, it just looks super red. And before you get really intimidated, I just want to show you guys how really easy this correction is. And so we're going to start by going to our correction node, and let's just bring up our gamma. So is just going to give us a little bit of level, maybe our lift as well. We'll get this away from 0, but we still want to maintain that contrast. I might bring my gain up slightly too. So before and after, so we made it brighter. And then now we just got to get rid of the red tinge. So some people would do this with temperature or offset. I prefer in this scenario to use the gamma. And so we are just going to push this towards blue and sort of just finesse it to where it looks good to my eye. If we go before and after, maybe we'll go a little bit more blue. And then maybe bring our gain up slightly. And this is where, guys, you just kind of got to finesse it with what looks good. I'm really just keeping an eye on the whites and trying to get something that still feels warm but is not overly red. And so I might bring our gamma back down just for the skin, and that right there I really like. So obviously ungraded and then graded, but before we made the correction we were sitting right there. And I think this is a super common example of how to make LUTs work for you. When we get to this clip here, indoors at a wedding, I think it already looks great. I would say when I paste it, I might turn the vignette on. And then the really only thing I'm seeing is maybe the skin looks a little red. The walls are kind of a green. And so I'm just going to come over here to gamma and just push it a little bit towards blue. And guys, I like, this is ever so slightly, but it makes the world of difference of, that looks great. But I would say the skin looks a little bit red. That looks a lot better to me. If you did want to bring up the blacks with using the lift, you could, maybe the gamma back down. And that to me, guys, is a really great look. Here's another common wedding scenario, a sparkler exit. There's not a lot of lighting. Paste it right away. I actually really like the warmth that's going on. We're just going to increase the entire exposure of the image using the offset. So let's just bring up the offset. So we're getting away from 0. And then let's come to our adjustment node and just bring up our gain. And the reason why I'm doing this here, this high curve node changes our contrast and limits how high our highlights can be. So sometimes if your highlights are, as you can see here, kind of ramming into that wall, I will, if I do want the highlights to be a little bit brighter, I will come to the adjust node, and you will see then it can get us past that threshold. So I think to my eye this looks great. Again, super simple tweaks. We're not going to use the vignette because I don't really need to darken these people on the outside. I want to be able to see them, and the image is already dark enough. Moving on to this clip here, an indoor sort of interview shot. If we paste right away, you're going to see it looks a little red, and you guys already saw me make this correction earlier, but let's just bring up our lift to save our blacks, and then we're going to push this towards blue, and bam, right away we're already there. Before the correction, after, before and after. I think that looks really good, gets rid of that red tinge while still keeping the overall warmth of the image. We're now going to move along to color grading Flog 2, and so we're going to go ahead and if we start with our same node tree here, we do need to change this LUT to the Flog 2 LUT. So we're going to do Flog 2 LUT A. You guys will see right away we're looking great. Maybe turn our vignette on. And I do want to show you guys this. Whenever I'm grading Flog footage, I do want to retain as much information as possible and just keep the image looking really rich. And so one way I like to do that is to go to our first node that's highlight. We're going to bring this down, and you'll see that it's making just the high end of our image darker. Maybe go -50. And you'll see that also the skin was pushed down slightly. The image just looks more moody, and I don't want to leave it here, but we are just retaining some of the highlight information. And then we go to our adjust and brighten it back up. For whatever reason, doing this, guys, just really looks good to my eye. The only other corrections that I would make to this image are just adjusting our gamma slightly. I'm just looking at the skin, just brightening it up ever so slightly. And so before and then after, I think this looks really great. We're going to use this as a starting point for these next few grades because these were shot in the same location. And so right away we're going to paste it. I would say it looks pretty good. The bride looks a little bit bright, so we're going to bring our highlights down in that first node. And then using our correction, let's bring up the lift. And the reason we're doing this is before I would just say the edges out here look a little dark, so we're going to undo the vignette and just bring up our lift ever so slightly just to give a little bit more life. And then we're going to bring our gain down because I feel like she still looks a little bit bright. And right there, guys, on an overcast day, I feel like this footage is looking awesome. Moving on to the next one, if we paste it here, you will see this looks quite bright and maybe we're losing some data. So let's go to our highlights, crank them down to -100, go back to our correct node, and everything just looks a little bit bright. So let's go to our gamma and bring it down. We're just going to pull the image down till it looks good. And right there, guys, that looks really great. This right here is a little bit of a different scenario. If we paste what we have, if we do move this, we will see there's quite a bit of a shadow on her face. So let's maybe start with this frame. Skin is looking a little bit red. So we're just going to come to our correction and go more towards green and blue, sort of down ever so slightly. And that is looking pretty good to me. If I were to change anything else, I would brighten up our gamma just because the skin was just looking a little bit dark. So I'd do that. And that, to me, guys, this image is looking great. But again, without the correction, we're only 60-70% of the way there. By making just those subtle corrections helps this footage match very nicely. This one right here, we're just going to paste what we have. It looks great. The only thing I would see is just brightening it up a tad with our gamma. Turn on our vignette, make them pop a little bit more, and then I will make sure our highlights are pulled down. And then we're going to go to our correction, and I would say it looks good. It looks a little bit cool compared to these other clips. So under our correction node, under the gamma, we're just going to push a little bit more towards red. You guys will see before and then after. I think that really helps our whites be a little bit more true white and their skin to look nice and warm. Okay, so moving on. This is a clip of me inside my house from another YouTube video I did. We just paste our standard Flog 2 node tree here with no corrections. We just have the LUT and then the film effects. I would say there's just a few tweaks that I would want to make so it looks a little bit warm. So we're gonna go to correction, take our gamma, pull it a little bit more towards blue, just to get rid of a little bit of that tinge. So you guys will see that. I mean, that makes a big difference right away. And we will go ahead and just try and retain these highlights as much as possible. So let's pull down this and you guys will see we get some of this detail back. Maybe leave it around there. But to my eye, this darkens up our image too much. So then we're going to go to our adjustment node and push a little bit more level back. And again, this is just a good example of using this first node to retain those highlights, doing any corrections, and overall, I think this image really looks great. If we paste it to the next clip here, I don't think we need to tweak anything at all. The lighting was really similar. We could retain a little bit more of our blacks if we wanted to. I don't really feel like it needs it, but bring up our lift slightly, and we could have done that same thing on the last one, but I honestly don't mind it. I think those clips cut together really nicely. Moving on to this next clip here, we're now in Flog 1, and this is showing a scenario that is less than ideal. So outdoor ceremony, really bright. It's being backlit, thankfully, but these greens are just super bright. And so I'm going to show you guys how I would attack color grading something like this that is less than ideal. So if we go ahead and paste our node tree, this is our Flog2 LUT, and we're going to need to go and change this to Flog1 because this footage was shot in Flog1. And right away, I think we're looking decent, but I mean, super bright. These greens are like a lime green, and our skin is looking pretty pale. So to correct this, let's go to our highlight node. Let's go ahead and crank this back to 100. That gets our highlights under control from the get-go. We'll come to our adjustment node and add back a little bit of gain. And I'm really just bringing this closer to this 90% mark. I think that looks good. And then we're going to attack the rest of this image. So we're going to go to our correction, and I will say it's looking a little bit cool to me if I'm looking in here. And the skin, so we're going to use a little bit of our gamma and just push it ever so slightly towards red, ever so slightly. I mean, that's tiny correction. And we're going to bring our lift down and our gamma up, just kind of finessing the contrast here. But to my eye, that looks pretty decent. We're already in a lot better of a place than we started. But to further tweak this, we really need to control these greens. So this is where we're going to go to our adjustment node, and we're going to, for the first time, touch the hue versus hue, hue versus sat, and hue versus luma controls. And these are great for controlling these specific colors. So a lot of times I don't touch these unless I have to, but this would be a have to scenario. So we're going to turn on our dots, and you can already see, this is where this color is coming from. So pull it down, and you can see instantly how much we can separate, these different colors. So we're just going to desaturate these greens until they look a little more natural. So before, after, just controlling that green. If we go to our hue, this is where we can change the tint of them. Let's push them a little bit warmer so they're less green, ever so slightly though. I mean, little corrections, guys, go a long way. And then if we go back to our sat, because we're pulling this down, it is affecting our skin a little bit. I'm just going to bump our skin back up. So before and after, a lot better. And then the last thing here is just our hue luma. We're going to do the same thing with these yellows. Just pull down exposure on those. And right there, guys, that to me is like a massive difference. So, okay, so just to show you guys what we were doing. So this is where we started, Flog1. This is just our LUT and our film effects. It looks decent, but again, not all the way there. If we want to get a little bit better, these are these corrections we made with our highlights and our hue versus sat. I feel like that looks pretty good to me. Maybe the skin looks a little bit warm, so we would come in here and just pull this back down slightly. But guys, to me, that clip looks awesome. We really saved a hard scenario to shoot in, and I think it looks really good. The last few sequences we're going to look at is some footage I pulled from Artgrid, and I wanted to show you guys how my LUTs work with different camera systems. And so these first few clips were shot on the Blackmagic Ursa Mini, and if we go ahead and just paste our standard Rec 709 LUT, again, we're using the Meadow standard LUT A. Guys, this looks super good. If I were to change anything, this looks a little pink to me, so I'll come to our correction. I will push this a little bit more towards green. Before, after, maybe that was a little too much. Pull it back slightly. And I might pull back our highlights just a tad. Before, after, before, after. If we take this exact grade, paste it on this next clip, I feel like it looks pretty good. Maybe we were a little bit green. So we would go to our correction and bring it back a little bit more towards magenta. But guys, that looks great. I might brighten it up just a tad because when this guy walks in, it's a little bit dark due to the lighting in there. Maybe pull up our gamma and our gain a tad. But I feel like these clips both matching quite nicely. Moving along to this one, looking pretty good just by pasting what we had from before. Let's just adjust the skin, so pull the skin a bit towards blue and magenta, just to level it out. And I actually did that in the highlight node. I should have done that in the correction node, but just will show you guys the before and after. And we'll paste that here. And I think that looks really great. These last few clips were shot on the Sony FS7. And let's just start by pasting our standard grade. Let's park it here because we can see the skin. And there's two things I want to address here. Exposure, we're looking a little dark. And then overall tones, so skin, and then the rest of the image. And we're not going to key anything. We're just going to do this with simple broad adjustments. So starting with our correction, actually starting with our highlight, let's pull down our highlights. You guys will see us retain all that information in the sky. Go into corrections and just look at our blacks down here, pull up our lift just to get a little bit more life back in the image. They were already clipped from the get-go, but I feel like that looks a lot better before and then after. This looks pretty blue to me, so we're gonna go to our gamma and just push a little bit of warmth in there. So before, after. Looks really great. Really like how this is looking. Last thing is our skin. And so because we could not really fix that with our larger tools, we are going to go to our adjust node and go to hue sat. And this is just a pretty simple pulling down the reds. And then go to our hue. Also pull down the reds, and this shifts it a little bit more towards green. And we're just going to go down ever so slightly. But guys, you can see what a big difference that makes. I mean, look at his skin, his shirt, his hand. It really just pulls this whole image into a similar world. Even to this clip before, these look a lot more tonally similar. And if this was a little too low contrast for you, if you wanted to brighten this back up, I would, in our adjustment node here, just push a little bit of level back into the sky. And I feel like that looks really great. So if we use this as a starting point, go to our next clip here. If we paste it, I feel like it looks really great. We could actually just pull our blacks down a little bit. So pull our blacks back down just to match this one a little bit more. That looks pretty similar to me. Maybe pull our highlights up slightly, but those look pretty good to me. And then if we take this one and paste it here, that looks really great. And we might pull our blacks back up, pull our gain down. We're just really trying to make these feel similar. And I feel like those to my eye all feel pretty close. So yeah, I just wanted to show you guys with footage that is not Fujifilm how these LUTs were designed to really just help make your footage look good. My heart in making these LUTs was just to easily get images that are pleasing to my eye, not too much contrast being added, and just subtle kind of adjustments to the overall tones of the image. So before and after, before and after. I feel like these really just help bring these images to life. Color grading is such a detailed process, and we are shooting in a lot of different conditions, and I feel like these LUTs do a good job of making the process easy, while also being flexible if there are adjustments that you guys need to make based on your own conditions. So the final two things I wanted to touch on in this video were noise reduction and grain. If you were going to add noise reduction, you would just want to add a node to the beginning of your node tree here, call it something like NR, and then you can navigate to the motion effects, where this is where you can adjust Your noise reduction, Evan Schneider just did a video on this. You should go watch his because it's really detailed, and I'm definitely going to be referencing it in the future if I do have some particularly noisy footage. But yeah, you would just add this right here into this first node. The last thing that we're going to talk about is grain. And so I typically do not add grain on the clip level here. The reason being, if you add film grain and tweak your settings and then paste it to another clip, if you want to adjust any of these settings, you're going to have to go through each individual clip and change it. So I will show you guys what I do. I come up here to timeline and do add node. We're just going to add this node here, connect the lines, go to our effects, film grain, drag it on there, and this is going to apply grain to our entire timeline. So any clip that's in here is going to get the same grain effect, which is super helpful when we might be needing to tweak it throughout our project. So to start, I like to go to 16mm 500T, bring our grain size down pretty small, and then I like to bring up the grain strength until I find a level that looks good. Maybe bring it up a little bit more. And now if you guys go to these other clips, they're all going to have the same grain applied. And if we ever needed to tweak that, we would just come back here to our timeline viewer, and we could call this grain. If you did want to make one clip particularly more grainy, then I would do that on the clip level. So then I would come here and I would add a node, call it film grain, and then do the same thing. Just go ahead and increase the amount of grain you would want to make a particular clip more grainy. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful to you. I just wanted to do a broad overview of my process and just the little tweaks that I'm making to a lot of the footage that I'm color grading. Obviously, color grading can get a lot more complicated than this, but for this first video, I just wanted to show you guys in general how I approach footage that is already looking good and you're not needing to make too many tweaks to. I hope you found it helpful. Feel free to check out my store in the link below if you guys are interested in checking out my LUTs or film effects. I ultimately just hope that they would help you make better videos, that you would be able to streamline your process and to get to images that you really enjoy. And so until next time, peace.